could say good evening. It's actually good morning because it's 20 past 12 a.m. And I've just emerged from the cinema after spending roughly the last 5 hours in there, because this evening I went to see an It double bill. So this was chapter 1 from 2017 and chapter 2 from like now, shown back to back, which actually I thought was pretty cool. So I'm kind of going to talk about them as a whole, because that's never happened before. Me holder thingy fell off me windscreen, so I'll probably just hold it here for now. I'm going to talk about them as a whole because it is one whole story, and this the second one very much picks up where the first one left off. So, bit of background. The book, Stephen King's It, was first published in 1986. It was his 22nd novel. By all accounts, bit of a smash hit. I have attempted to read this book twice in my life. The first time I tried to read it, I was about 12 or 13 and far too young for it, and I bailed. The second time, I think I was in my 20s and bailed again. I got a lot further in, but it was too freaking dark and it unsettled the crap out of me. It wasn't even stuff to do with the clown, it was other stuff to do with other characters, because obviously in a book you go into a lot more backstory on characters that in the films are quite peripheral. It just got under my skin and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it was making me uneasy, and I just thought, no, I'm not going to read it. So I've never finished reading it. Then in the early 90s there was a miniseries, like a 2-part TV movie miniseries made of it, which if you're my age you've seen. It's okay. The first part's better than the second. And then a couple of years ago, a director called Andy Muschietti, not machete as in like a machete, but Muschietti. Anyway, he decided he was going to have a crack at it, and a very good crack he had, really. Jesus Christ. Part 1, chapter 1, was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. And one of the things that so the people in the car next to me are about to get into their car and probably wondering why I'm talking to my steering wheel, but I'm opting not to care. What was I saying? Yes, so a huge change that was made. The original book, part 1, is set in the 1950s, and then the modern day bit is sort of in the 80s. Because the whole idea is that this ancient evil, that is Pennywise, comes back every 27 years. What I loved about chapter 1 in 2017 is that they took the past bit, #the past, and instead of it being in the 1950s, it was in the 1980s. And there's this huge joyous wave of nostalgia for all things 80s at the minute, which I frankly am loving, because I'm an 80s baby. I was born right at the beginning of the 80s, so sort of 10 when the decade, not quite 10 when the decade ended, so I remember a lot about the 80s. And we've had Stranger Things and other things, just sort of really, sorry, I've got an itchy nose, really celebrating that 80s-ness, that 80s spirit, that 80s vibe. And yeah, so the chapter 1 really did that. And 7 kids, bikes, adventure, albeit horrendous ones, it can't help but put me in the mind of The Goonies, which is an absolute seminal 80s classic and my second favourite film of all time. I'm watching the first part again tonight. I just enjoyed again the 80s-ness of it, the attention to detail, the bikes they have, the kid, Eddie, who's the little hypochondriac in the group, he has some awesome t-shirts. I think I spotted an Airwolf one and a Thundercats t-shirt, so it's got that lovely nostalgic feel. All the younger actors are exceptional. I think they all do an absolutely cracking job, and the whole first part of the film, chapter 1, was just them. And they were all absolutely cracking. Finn Wolfhard stood out. even though, like I say, they were all impressive, he is of course in Stranger Things and must now feel like he actually lives in the 80s. He plays Richie in chapter 1, and he's just superb. He gets all the best lines. In part 2, chapter 2, which I saw tonight, we were obviously present day-ish, which worked really well. Doesn't really affect the story at all. And the actors they got in to do grown-up versions of these children, like, it's not a shabby cast. Biggest names among them, James McAvoy plays a grown-up Bill, Jessica Chastain is the grown-up Beverly, and Bill Hader plays the grown-up Richie, so Finn Wolfhard grows into Bill Hader, we now have learned. And again, still gets all the best lines. But all of the casting for the grown-up versions was very well matched, with the exception of Ben, but I won't spoil that for you. And yeah, it's very it's got a strong sense of style. I loved when they're in Derry and it's the 80s again. It sort of put me in mind of things like the Goonies, and it made me think of Stand By Me, which is, even though yes that's set in the 50s, that's also based on a Stephen King story. And I think one of the things he does exceptionally well, apart from make you crap your pants horror, is he writes friendship. He writes childhood friendships and those bonds incredibly well. And I think that's what keeps you in the story, is the relationship between the Losers Club, the relationship between these kids, and that's very much brought to life by the actors who play them when they're younger. It then translates really well to the grown-up versions. So it's that story, that core friendship, that sort of keeps you in. Yes, it's a horror film. I did laugh a lot, and not at the horror. Some morons I was in the cinema with did, I didn't. It did scare me in a number of places. I like that it's gone down the road of sort of almost like something like The Thing. There's quite a lot of I'm not articulate at this time in the morning, but there's quite a lot of sort of monster horror, which I know comes from the book, and I really enjoyed that. You know, big, scary, the Pennywise evolving into different things, and sort of there was some really creepy, nasty stuff. But yeah, I guess a modern horror audience isn't used to it and just didn't know how to take it, so laughed at it, and that's their prerogative. I really enjoyed it. I loved seeing the whole thing as a whole. I think part 2, chapter 2 is fantastic, and really sort of follows on beautifully. I did love hope this isn't hashtag spoilers, but I did love that we got more of the kids. So there's other stuff with the kids. There's quite a few flashbacks. Even when we get them as grown-ups, we flash back to when they were children. And I enjoyed that because they, as I said, the younger actors playing them were just spot on, absolutely superb. So I enjoyed that. I love the idea that it is like an ancient evil that's been around like forever, because it's something he's touched on before. Obviously with Pet Cemetery, it was like, you know, an ancient Indian burial ground. We've had this sort of, you know, this idea of an evil that's been there forever, or since time began, and I like that that's what this is. And it happens to manifest as a clown for these children, but it's sort of older than that, and that's kind of discussed a bit. It's good, it's solid. It's got some good scares in it. It's got some great horror special effects that I really enjoyed. The acting, as you'd expect, with the cast they've got, is tip top. And overall, I think it works really well. I think it's a very interesting and perhaps more faithful adaptation than the one that was done in the 90s. Stephen King actually makes a amusing Stan Lee style comedy cameo in this, which I also really enjoyed, and that tells me that he liked it, because notoriously he hasn't liked a lot of the adaptations of his work, because I think his works famously and notoriously it's quite difficult to adapt. But yeah, if you enjoyed chapter 1, I think you'll enjoy chapter 2 equally. I would urge everybody to do them as a double bill when they get the opportunity, which may well be when they're both, but you know, when the second one's out on Blu-ray, you can watch them both at home. But if your cinema locally is doing a double bill, go and do it. It's 5 hours at a cinema, but it's a great experience to get that continuity and get it done. in a oneer. Big thumbs up from me for it, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Well done all round. Now I'm going to drive home and get my horse to bed. Okay, thanks for listening, guys. Bye bye.